Hey everyone, welcome back to the Tune Project. Today I'm excited to be sharing with you all a Q&A video. A few weeks ago I asked you all on Patreon, Instagram, and here on YouTube to ask me some questions about the violin, just anything music related that you were wondering about, and you all came through with some really great questions. So I'm excited to answer those today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps my channel out, and if you're not already subscribed to the Tune Project, I invite you to click that red subscribe button below and the bell button so that you're notified each time I post a new video. So we're gonna start with the questions that came from Instagram, and the first one comes from Carolyn Hoopaw Stevens, who asks, how many years did it take you to sound proficient? Now, this is kind of a tricky question to answer because, I think everybody has their own idea of what proficient is. So I started when I was 6 years old playing the violin, and I would say maybe about 2 to 3 years later, I had a decent amount of repertoire built up. I studied classical at the time, so I was learning from the Suzuki method, and by the time I was probably about 8 or 9, I had a decent amount of pieces memorized that I was able to perform and play with others in a group setting. So, but then I would say when I was probably in high school, that's where I really noticed a jump in my level. I had a really great teacher, and that's where I really decided that I wanted to pursue music, and I really kind of buckled down and practiced hard. And so, I would say around that time is when I noticed my proficiency a little bit more. So hopefully that answers your question. And then another question comes from Mary Brun, who says, I'd like to know about the staccato technique. So staccato is basically when we play a series of notes with a slight separation in between each of them. So if we were to play legato, all of the notes would be connected like this. Whereas staccato, where we have a little bit of separation, sounds more like this. Alright, so if you were to play a scale with all staccato bow strokes, it would sound like this. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question there about staccato. Now we're gonna move on to the questions I got on Patreon. The first question comes from Sarah. She says, I would like some tips about playing with others. When I play in the amateur orchestra, it seems to me that I play too softly. This is a great question, and actually a really common issue that a lot of people have when they're first starting out. I was the same way when I was first starting out in orchestra. I was very shy about playing in front of others. I didn't want other people to hear me if I made a mistake, and that's very common. But I think the main thing to focus on is what you're doing rather than what everybody else is doing and what they're thinking, and just focus on having the best tone and playing the best that you can play. That's what's the most important, and most of the time nobody else is really thinking about what you're doing anyway, so it's best to just do the best that you can do and follow the dynamics that are in the music that you're given, and that's all you can ask for. Sarah also asks how to achieve a relaxed arm vibrato. That is a really great question too, and something that's also tricky to achieve, but technically, it's very simple. If you think about it, it's just actually doing it that can be tricky sometimes. So I would say just making sure that when you approach the violin before you start your vibrato, whether it's an exercise or just adding vibrato into a piece, making sure that your arm starts relaxed. Your fingers, your hand, they're all very relaxed and loose. And if you find that you're holding any tension in your thumb, especially as you're using vibrato, then try to take your hand away from the violin, shake it out, stretch out your hands, do whatever you need to do, come back to the violin, and then try that push-pull motion of vibrato with as relaxed of an arm and hand as you can. And that should really help, just making sure that you're being mindful of your left hand and your left arm all the way through. Sarah also asks, when I play a piece, I often stop as soon as I make a mistake, and she wants to know how to correct that. So that is also a really common thing and a really great question. It's natural to, when we hear ourselves mess up, to want to just immediately stop And I think when you're practicing on your own, that's totally fine to do. The important thing to make sure of though is that when you're stopping, you're not just stopping and then continuing on, but you're going back and you're correcting your mistake so that you are able to play through smoothly the next time. So what I would say is to take just that small section where you're having trouble, and whether it's a measure or 2 measures or just a couple of notes even, and try to play that small section as many times as you can until you can't get it wrong, and then go back, add a couple measures before or from the beginning of the line, play it all the way through, and see if you're able to play everything without stopping at that point where you made the mistake before. So that would be my suggestion to you if you were performing a piece, and if you have a tendency to stop as soon as you make a mistake when you're performing. That's a little bit of a different story. When we're performing, we always want to make sure no matter what happens that the show goes on, right? So we want to make sure that even if we do mess up, that we keep going and almost kind of pretend like nothing happened, because in all reality, when you're performing, if you make a mistake, there's nothing you can really do about it. It's not like you can stop and practice. You have to just hope that nobody heard the mistake and just keep going. And the likelihood of anybody in the audience actually noticing your mistake is very, very slim. So, don't worry about it so much. Just try your best to move past it and keep going. But yes, in terms of practicing and having the tendency to stop, like I said, as long as you go back and you drill that section and then put all of the pieces together, once you're able to play from beginning to end without stopping, that's how you'll know that you've truly learned the piece. All right, now we're moving on to questions from YouTube. So this comes from Meep41, and they ask any exercises and tips for playing faster. They go on to say that they have a piece they're working on with 16th notes, and they're trying to work up to 160 beats per minute. So they already kind of actually answered the question within their question. They mentioned that they're playing it slowly right now, and I would say that's the solution. That's really the best thing that you can do if you're working up to a certain tempo, is to start slowly. And even more than that, I would say find the number that you're starting at, find the number with the metronome where you're able to play through everything consistently without stopping or without slowing down. Make note of that. So for example, if you're working your way up to 160 and let's say you're at 80 or 100 right now, take note of that and then start there with your metronome and then slowly, gradually work your way up to 160. I always say if you can play something slow, you can play it fast. And that's so, so true, especially in this situation. So best of luck to you with getting those 16th notes up to speed. Our next question comes from Marty, who asks, can you give a practice routine sampler to be achieved in a 1 hour free time? So what to practice in sequence within the 1 hour period. I am a 5-month self-studying beginner. That's awesome. That's so cool, Marty. Yeah, so I would definitely say, whether you have an hour to practice or whether you have 3 hours, we always want to start by warming up. So if you do have an hour, I would say probably use about 10 minutes to warm up with scales, definitely. So whatever scale you're working on, or whether it's a series of scales, start there. And then I would say the next 10 minutes should be dedicated to any etudes or exercises that you're working on. So whether it's left hand exercises or bow, tone exercises, things like that, that's where the next little 10 minutes of your practice should be spent on. And then the bulk of the practice session should be on whatever piece or tune you're currently working on. So in this case, if we have an hour, that would be around 30 minutes. And then the last 10 minutes can be spent on reviewing tunes or pieces that you already know and are familiar with. Or if you're working on something fun, kind of on the side, then those last 10 minutes of your practice session should be spent on that. Because in reality, we want to wrap up our practice session on a positive note, no pun intended, and we want to make sure that we kind of round everything out nicely. And by ending with something that we're familiar with or something that's fun is a really good way to do that. Next question comes from Inder Kumar, who asks, I'm fond of learning to play violin. I also purchased one Indian-made 4x4, I think full size. how should I start learning to tune, play as of now at home? So my best advice here would be to find a teacher, especially if you're just starting out, have never played before, have no musical background. You definitely want to find somebody who knows what they're doing to kind of help guide you along with those beginning stages of learning the violin, because it's not an easy instrument, unfortunately. It's one of those instruments that's difficult, and it really is helpful to have somebody to walk you through kind of the basics. Another thing I would say is just kind of a plug here for my channel. I do have quite a few videos in my violin basics playlist on starting the violin and just kind of those fundamentals. So if you're interested, definitely check those out. I also have a series on a platform called Musiconn, where I kind of give an introduction to learning the violin from the very, very beginning, what you should do from the very first time you have a violin in your hand, and I kind of detail all of that on there. So if you're interested in either of those, definitely check those out. And our final question comes from Shahzad, who says, I love the violin. How long will it take to learn and sound good? That is a great question, and it actually kind of goes back to the first question I answered, and it really all is a matter of what you're willing to put into it. So, what you put into it is exactly what you're going to get out of it. So it's really up to you how long it takes for you to get to that level that you want to be. It really is just a matter of how much effort and time you're willing to put into it. Well, that wraps up this Q&A. Thank you so much to all of you who submitted questions. I had a lot of fun answering them. I hope you guys learned something from this video, and until next time, happy practicing. If you'd like to further your support of the Tune Project, be sure to head over to patreon.com/thetuneproject for information on that. And if you're planning on buying any music or doing any shopping on Amazon, be sure to head over to the Tune Project website, which I link in the description box of all of my videos. Click my Amazon banner, and whatever you purchase, a small percentage of that will go toward the Tune Project. This just keeps the Tune Project going and allows me to continue to create free content for you all.